If you thought the search for scapegoats ended along with the 30-year-long civil war in Sri Lanka in 2009, think again. The country's majority Sinhalese and largest minority Tamil Hindus are no longer fighting each other, but they may both have now found a new scapegoat, Sri Lanka's second largest Muslim minority. Sri Lanka has now declared a state of emergency for 10 days to rein in the spread of communal violence. The government's announcement comes a day after Buddhists and Muslims clashed in the central district of Kandy. Tensions have been growing between the two communities in Sri Lanka over the past year, with some hardline Buddhist groups accusing Muslims of forcing people to convert to Islam and vandalizing Buddhist archaeological sites. The aggression towards Muslims was primarily started by the Bodu Bala Sena, a militant Buddhist monk organization, several years after the end of the war. There were severe riots in southwestern Sri Lanka's Kalutara district back in 2014. Mosques, homes, shops, factories owned by Muslims were attacked. 4 people were killed and thousands rendered homeless. Last week, at least 5 Sri Lankan Muslims were severely injured in Sri Lanka's Tamil-speaking eastern province, where Muslims are, ironically, in the majority. The province was formally claimed by the Terrorist Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, or LTTE, as a, quote, Tamil homeland, unquote. This week, the scene of attacks has shifted to the holy Buddhist city of Kandy in the central hills of Sri Lanka. Special forces of the police and the armed forces are out in the town that houses the holiest Buddhist relic, the tooth of the Lord Buddha, and its surrounding areas. After the death of a Sinhalese man allegedly at the hands of a Muslim mob, there is simmering tension in Kandy and fears that Sinhalese and Muslim mobs may go on a rampage. Though about 36 Sri Lankan Muslims were believed to have left the island nation to join the Islamic State in the previous years, Sri Lankans of all regions are famously tolerant and well assimilated into their country's unique culture and traditions. But of late, radical Buddhist groups like the BBs are on the rise again. BBS are on the rise again. This time, they are alleging forcible conversion by Sri Lanka's Muslims. Given a debt crisis and a much weakened coalition government in Colombo, Sri Lanka's President Maithripala Sirisena and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, both of whom are the authors of the current so-called unity government, will have to act and act fast. That is, if they want to prevent their country's blood-soaked history from repeating itself. Let's go straight across now to WION's senior foreign editor, Padma Rao, joining us for more on this. Padma, if you can break down for our viewers, as we just established, the rather unfortunate scene that is unraveling in Sri Lanka.
Well, the very first thing that one has to make clear, Molly, is the fact that there are ethnic groups in Sri Lanka, and there are linguistically diverse groups, and there are religiously diverse groups. In fact, it's a microcosm of what India is. So it's, one cannot generalize and say that it's the Sinhalese who are beating up the Tamils, or the Tamils were beating up the Muslims, or the Muslims were beating up the Sinhalese. Excuse me, because you have Tamils who are Muslim, or rather Muslims who speak Tamil. You have Muslims who speak Sinhalese, if they live in the south, and you have Christian Tamils and various other religions within those ethnic groups. So what we have to clarify is that the way I see it today, it's a very it's a multi-religious, multi-racial and multi-ethnic society, Sri Lanka, and these tensions have been quite latent since the end of the civil war, which was primarily an ethnic conflict between the Tamils of the north and east and the Sinhalese majority of the south. Now that was over in 2009, and there was a lull in this kind of violence. So this is the first time that we're seeing violence erupt between two groups, and I would like to think and emphasize that the root cause of this violence does not lie in ethnicity and does not lie so much in religious diversity as it does in day-to-day problems of survival, of existence, of joblessness, of the country's external debt having grown so huge that there is an influx and a plethora of foreigners and foreign investments coming into this, what is a relatively small country. And I think it is that growing frustration. And to top it all, and most importantly, we have a government government in Colombo, which has been struggling to survive. It was formed as a unity government between the two largest parties of Sri Lanka, and it is fraying at the edges. There was a no confidence vote, by the way, Molly, against Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, which was also slated to be introduced in Parliament today. Now that has been put off, and the emergency imposed instead. The security forces are out in full force. We've not seen this kind of display of security forces since the end of this civil war. In fact, since the months before the civil war ended. So we have to make clear that these are things that seem under control. This is Kandy. Kandy is the holiest town for Buddhists from all over the world. This is where the famous temple of the tooth is, the Dalida Maligava, which is where the tooth, the holy relic, the tooth of the Lord Buddha is housed. Millions of Buddhists stream to this place from all over Sri Lanka and the world. So yes, the police and the security forces will certainly be taking additional precautions in Kandy. But having said that, I think the government of Sri Lanka has to act and act fast to address the root causes of these riots and these disturbances, and also make sure that groups like the Bodhubala Sena, which is a radical group consisting of Buddhist monks, this group and various other groups, and there are radical groups as anywhere in the world within all communities, that they are kept under control and are not tolerated or turned a blind eye to merely in the sake of, for the sake of maintaining the outward facade of Sri Lanka being a peaceful state. These kinds of disturbances are common in any country where there are larger problems, and I think these are reflections, this is a microcosm of the larger problem that is confronting Sri Lanka.
I was just coming to that, Padma, this declaration of emergency by the government. Was this along expected lines?
Yes, it certainly was along expected lines, but then I don't think that the emergency is, the emergency is a band-aid. The emergency will do some justice to the situation on the ground as it is for the coming, days, weeks, perhaps even months. But the root cause, the issues have to be addressed. There is rising discontentment, and we have seen all over the world when there is discontentment with larger issues, with day-to-day, issues that concern livelihoods, then yes, those problems can escalate, and they can be lent a touch of ethnic differences or religious differences, and that is not the Sri Lanka I know. I have covered it for 30 years. It is not, even the differences, even at the peak of the conflict between the Tamils and the Sri Lanka and the Sinhalese, it was not about religion. It was not about the Hindu Tamils or the Christian Tamils vis-a-vis the Buddhist Sinhalese. The Hindus of Sri Lanka worship the Buddha and vice versa, and all religions tolerate each other's mosques and churches, and so there is a huge amount of religious harmony in Sri Lanka. So it could well be a question of just the larger problems playing out on the ground and reflecting in sort of escalating into such situations.
All right, we're going to leave it there for the moment. Padma Rao, thanks very much for joining us and helping our viewers understand the finer details of the situation as it unfolds in Sri Lanka. 10 days of emergency have now been declared by the government there.